This episode is brought to you by BigMooseCoffeeCompany.co. Pals, greetings and welcome to another episode of Everything Endurance. Thank you very much for joining us. And genuinely, thank you. This has really felt like a two-way chat over the last few weeks. We've got more listeners, more likes, more reviews, more comments, more suggestions on who we should be talking to. So keep it coming. We really appreciate it. As I say, this is a two-way chat. You guys are as much part of this as I am. We all over the world seem to be moving a little bit closer to a situation where there's light at the end of the tunnel. So thanks to everyone whose massive efforts and dedication over the last 3 months have pushed us in the direction of daylight. And speaking of people all around the world, hola and muchas gracias to our listener in Guatemala. The stats I've been looking at over the last couple of days tell me we've got somebody there who's regularly downloading the podcast. So hi. Nice to meet you. Let's see what other corners of the globe we can get this podcast pushed to, eh? If you are one of the uber keen and delightful people that downloads this podcast as soon as it comes out, then it's currently Saturday the 6th of June 2020, and you've got a few hours left to head to the Beyond the Ultimate website and sign up for the Virtual Jungle Ultra. Our team and a whole bunch of runners were supposed to be in the middle of nowhere, Peru right now, heading to the start line of a jungle race that would have been 5 days of tearing around in one of the most beautiful areas of the world I've ever clapped eyes on. We're going to have to wait the better part of a year now before we get to go there in person, but we're going to do our best to bring as much of the jungle as we can to you. So head to the website. It's completely free to enter, and we'll be showcasing as much of what the jungle has to offer as we can. There's different distances to run every day. There's prizes for the podium at the end and little spot prizes as we go along as well. So there's plenty for everyone to get involved with. I don't think I'm going to take up too much more of your time. I think we're going to move on to today's guest. Today's guest has got some fantastic stories. This is an endurance athlete, or I think we settled on the term expedition runner, who specializes in running across gigantic mountain ranges. At the moment, in fact, she's partway through her target of running the length of a mountain range on every continent on the planet. And this whole adventure started with her at the age of 28, heading out on her own to Kyrgyzstan, a country that I wouldn't blame you too much if you couldn't point to on a map, and that I know full well quite a lot of people will struggle to spell without having to Google it first. No guidebooks, nobody to tell her exactly where she should start or finish or where she's going to get her supplies along the way. She just dropped herself in there and went for it. And this is an athlete who doesn't seem to take no for an answer at all. I think you're going to enjoy the interview as much as I enjoyed asking the questions in the first place. So without further ado, we're going to move on to talk to Jenny Tough. Jenny, how are we?
We're very well. How are you, Will?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you very much. We're talking to you somewhere a little less expedition-y than you'd usually be.
Oh, the polar opposite. I'm in quarantine. I've just arrived back home in Canada, so I'm doing the mandatory 14-day quarantine. It's definitely the longest I've ever sat still for. I have access to a turbo trainer, and that's about all the movement that I can do in a day. Yeah, way less expedition-y, but definitely doing the isolation thing, which I know very well. So there are some familiar bits.
Yeah, you've had some practice with that. How long then before you're out of quarantine? When are you unleashed?
2 days. I mean, my legs are literally fidgeting right now. Like, I can look down at them and they're like, oh, it's time to go for a run, a really big run.
No, I absolutely bet. One thing I'm going to have to cover right at the beginning here is Jenny Tough. It's your real name. And I'm sorry. I made a snap assessment. I looked at it. I thought, Jenny Tough. Okay, that's a bold name to have chosen for yourself, but fair enough, we'll go with it. No, this is the real deal. Fear is
how many people genuinely believe that's like my Instagram name, and I'm just not that cocky. I would never do that. It's my real name. It's pronounced Tooth because it's from Aberdeenshire in Scotland. So it's not even actually Tough. It's Tooth, but yeah, real name. Got lucky on that one.
Yeah, I mean, you were doomed from the start, really. With a name like that, you weren't going to be an accountant.
No, God, no.
Well, we've gone back into your past already to talk about the origin of your name. What about the origin of you? Before we leap into your challenges, where does adventure start for you?
Actually, it started really young when I was a kid. So between the ages of 10 and 12, my parents took a leave of absence from life, I guess, and moved us onto our small sailboat, 37-foot yacht, and we traveled around the Caribbean. I was homeschooled, which I think a lot of people around the world can now empathize with, homeschooling your children.
Yeah.
And yeah, we lived on this boat. We traveled to lots of different countries, and my parents taught me about, life outside of privileged Canada, and definitely bit me with the travel bug really hard. So as soon as I was growing up and free to go travel on my own, that was what I did. And so travel just became my biggest passion in my life. And the endurance side was, just kind of like my other hobby, that I got into marathon running and got into cycling and stuff like that. And eventually realized these two things can go together really well. If I combined my love of travel with my love of adventure, then I can start to explore the world the way that makes me the happiest on my own terms, do anything by human power, which I really loved. And that's kind of just how things started to snowball.
Well, having watched a couple of the films and stuff that you've got on your website, you've gone down the right route. You've chosen something that definitely works for you.
Oh yeah, I'm having a great time.
But you and nobody just jumped straight into like a 1,000-kilometer through hike or whatever. You mentioned you were a bit of a marathoner. Where did the running journey start for you?
It actually started from a really negative place. I started running when I was a teenager just because I was starting to get a little chubby. And obviously for teenage girl, body image is a really difficult subject. And that was something that was really hard for me. And my dad, actually, he was a marathon runner, or is a marathon runner, I should say. And he suggested I start running. I had a golden retriever dog, and, those dogs just need so much exercise. So he said, take Tessa, go start running. And I did it really resentfully at first. Like I had a pair of skater shoes and I would just plod around the neighborhood with my poor Tessa. And those started to get better, and they started to get longer, and I started to get real running shoes. And then I went away to university and just started finding that the days that I did go for a run, the days that I got myself up early in the morning and went out and did this, exercise cardio that I totally resented, that I thought was just punishment for eating kind of thing. Those days were the best days, because after my run, I would feel amazing. I would be able to study well. I'd be more creative. I'd have more confidence. And also I moved away and I started running further just because I wanted to see what was around the next corner. And so running kind of turned into these adventures, and it made me feel good. And so it just started to improve. And then I said to myself, I wonder if I could do a 10K. And I signed up for a 10K. And I remember finishing that 10K, and it took me an hour. Like I wasn't good. I remember finishing it almost in tears. Like I couldn't believe that, I had managed a 10K. And, it's so, I never want to forget that is where I started, and tell people that's where I started, because I think people have this idea that I can just run 1,000 kilometers and I must be some kind of athlete, and I'm not. That's where I started, and we've all got to start somewhere.
It's one of the things that's so fascinating about this scene is that, people think that given what you're doing, you must be some kind of elite athlete who's tied down to rigorous training programs every day with a sponsorship program behind you and everything else. You're like, actually,
absolutely not. No, you'd be really disappointed if you knew the reality. There's none of that.
It's interesting what you say there as well about the running actually starting from a negative place. I think it's such an easy trap to fall into, where running or physical exercise can become what you just referred to it as, which was punishment for eating carbs, where it's not necessarily something you do to get the positive feelings that come from doing the run itself, but to try and rid yourself of these negative feelings about yourself. And it won't always work if that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I kind of think our entire industry around health is kind of framed in a negative way, that this is something that you have to do. Like it's a chore, like you got to do enough cardio and stuff like that. And no one ever talks about this stuff as play or as adventure. And, if you kind of reframe activity as a sense of play, we think play is just for kids, but if I go out on my mountain bike, I'm definitely playing. I'm there for joy and for fun. And if I stop thinking about how many calories I'm burning and I start thinking about adventure and joy, then then it totally reframes it. And then it's not just physical health, it's mental health. And that's so important to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once you've got into sort of endurance level distances, ultra running type distances, you've gone past the point where you can be doing it and hating what you're doing. Like as tough as it is, and there's a lot of type 2 fun involved in it, you must be getting some joy out of the process of running in order to be able to run 50k or 50 miles in a day.
Oh yeah, you've definitely gone past the point of being.
You've gone past running off pizza.
At that point, you're not doing your body any good service. Like, you're definitely harming it. But obviously, it's a wonderful thing to do if you can stick with it.
So, what was the first adventure?
The first adventure, I was 21. I just moved back to Canada after university, and I decided I'd never been to the Yukon. I've been to every province in Canada, but I'd never been to the north. So I wanted to go to the Yukon, and I wanted to go by human power. And so I decided I could cycle there. I'd recently met a cycle tourist. I didn't even know this was a thing that existed. And I thought, that'll be great because I've been going to spin classes. So, you know, how hard could riding a bike outside be?
I'm ready for this.
Thing. Yeah, exactly. So went out and bought a bike and packed it up and left for this 2,000 kilometer journey over the Rocky Mountains. That was like remote bear country kind of thing. I was totally in over my head. I had no idea how to fix a puncture or how bicycles worked or how to like get in and out of my clip pedals. So when I bought the bike, the guy at the shop insisted you cannot ride a bicycle unless you're clipped into it and like permanently fastened to it, which I thought was horrifying for someone who doesn't know how to ride a bike. But he said I needed to, so I bought the pedals. And yeah, it started out as kind of just a series of disasters, but got better as I went along.
So you very much chose the adventure and then learned how to do it on the fly while you were there.
Yeah, and that continues to be my attitude.
I've talked to a couple of adventurers like that recently. I think for me, as a naturally very anxious person, I'm an over planner, if anything. But would you put yourself at the other end of the scale where you're likely to throw yourself at the thing and figure it out once you're on the ground?
Yeah, I would. I think I might get bored and over planning is kind of my thing. Like, I think if I work on it for too long and then I lose that sense of mystery, if I know what's going to happen or what's going to be the conclusion, then I start to break up with it. Obviously, like within the realm of safety, you know, I do look at where I'm going and say, like, what are the risks involved and mitigate against them. But yeah, I don't over plan, especially when it comes to really big adventures. I think having a plan, it's kind of like that God quote, like, if you want to make the mountains laugh, tell them your plans. You know, things are going to change. You got to be adaptable. That's kind of the number one skill that an adventurer needs, is to be able to be adaptable. So I think that's also part of my never over planning, is just knowing that whatever my plan is, it won't happen.
Well, yeah, fair enough. I live in hope that I'll get to that point at some point. But until then, I'll be spreadsheeting and listing everything. You know,
it's not for everyone. People like their spreadsheets. Like, you know, you do you. If that's the way that you like to adventure, then do it. There's nothing wrong with it.
Oh, thanks, Jenny. I appreciate it. So I really want to get on to your big challenge. At the moment, you are partway through the process of running a mountain range on every continent.
Yep, I'm 4 out of 6 now. Number 5 is hopefully around the corner.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Number 5 isn't too far away.
Yeah. Well, I'm on the continent now, so that's a big start.
Yeah, you're partway there already. But when you did the first of these mountain challenges, had you already got it in mind that you were going to do a mountain range on each continent, or is that something you've decided as you've gone along with this?
Oh God, absolutely not. When I went to go run across Kyrgyzstan, it was, you know, by far the biggest thing I'd ever done. And I didn't know if I could do it. And that's quite exciting, to do something that you don't know if you can do it, because there's a lot of freedom in that, knowing that it might be a failure. You just go, oh, well, let's just give this my best shot. I'm probably going to fail. So, you know, it's kind of exciting. But no, it was definitely going to be a one-off. You know, running 1,000 kilometers, that's a lot. You don't really want to think about doing more. And it was just an extreme case of type 2 fun. It was after I got home from Kyrgyzstan, I think I didn't have a plan going forward. And so I really dipped into those post-adventure blues for a little bit. And then one day, one of my friends was over and she said, you know, I've never actually seen the footage from your little run across Kyrgyzstan. Can I see it? So we put it up on the TV in the house, and for the first time I looked back on all the images of everything that I did and this beautiful alpine country that I went to. And I just thought to myself, you know what, that was actually the best time of my life. Like, I had so much fun. I definitely want to do that again. And so I don't really know what, I think there was just a bottle of wine involved that I decided that, you know, I would do this again, but I would do this again a lot of times. Like, I made a list of all the mountain ranges I want to run across. And you don't realize how many mountain ranges, because there's so many sub ranges. You don't realize how many there actually are in the world. If you Wikipedia mountain ranges, there's a really big list. And so my list was out of hand, and I just said, okay, well, I'll just do one per continent. That'll just whittle this down to a reasonable size challenge. You know, and then it's a thing. It's got a theme. So, so I decided I would do that. And a few months later, I sent off to Morocco to do the Atlas Mountains.
Fantastic. But so Kyrgyzstan was the first of these challenges. And you mentioned there might have been a bottle of wine involved in the early parts of the planning stages. How did you land on Kyrgyzstan? And if there is anyone from Kyrgyzstan that happens to be listening to this, I mean no offense. It's just I had to Google it to make sure I was spelling it right. You know,
I'm sure there are people that can't point that out on a map. I was kind of walking around
Bishkek hoping someone would say the name of the country out loud so that I could make sure I was saying it correctly.
Because it's a lot of consonants.
Yeah, I know. You know, it came from, you know, I grew up in the Canadian Rockies, and I live in Scotland now, and I don't really get homesick, but I do miss the mountains. And I always find that every time I'm in mountains, wherever they are, I get that sense of home, that I feel that comfort of home. So it came from kind of wanting to challenge that and go to some mountains that I knew nothing about, that had completely different culture from the mountains that I knew. And then I came across the Tian Shan somehow. And I just remember seeing the first picture that I saw of them. And it was like that heart stopping, like my life isn't complete until I go there kind of moment.
Wow.
So all I knew was I needed to go to the Tian Shan. I didn't decide then I was going to run. I actually thought I was going to bike. And then I decided, you know, they're only 1,000 kilometers across. You know, if I biked it, it'd be over too soon. I better slow it down somehow.
Your concern was you'd get through it too quickly to take it in.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to slow things down. So I thought I'll just run, do it all on foot. Then you definitely get to take everything in.
Fantastic. You say that you're someone who's maybe a little more inclined to getting into the adventure and then making the plan as you go. You might not have had as much of a choice with Kyrgyzstan. I can't imagine there's a lot of guidebooks or websites or you know. I mean, you tell me. Was it difficult to plan that?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think it's hard in this day and age to get to feel like a real explorer, because it feels like everything's been done. But Kyrgyzstan definitely fell into the category at the time of you definitely get to be an explorer. You know, it wasn't very thoroughly mapped. The last time it was really well mapped was when the Soviets were in power. And the year that I ran across Kyrgyzstan, that was the 25-year anniversary of the collapse of the Soviet Union. So,
wow.
You know, the maps were 25 years out of date, and they were in Cyrillic text. And that was the best that I had to go on.
That and Google
guidebooks,
Earth.
Yeah. Google Earth was everything to me. You know, The Lonely Planet had a chapter in their Central Asia guidebook. It didn't have a dedicated section. So, like, you know, there's just a couple of major towns in Kyrgyzstan that I knew what I was going to find. But for the middle of the country, I knew absolutely nothing. So, yeah, I was scraping the barrel of the internet trying to find anything I could learn about this country, which was really cool. You know, it meant that I went into it quite blind, and I really did get to feel like an explorer. I still haven't found anyone in recorded history that's gone across Kyrgyzstan on foot. Which meant that I was doing a world first. And that was also really exciting, because that also means there's definitely no guide. You know, there's no trail, there's no route. No one's telling you what's the best way to do this, what you should pack, what you should expect. You know, you're the first person that's going to find out what it takes to do that. And that was so exciting.
Absolutely, but there's a lot of uncertainty there as well. Like I've done a little multi-stage where, you know, I've gone 5 days with my kit on my back, and that's what you've got. But throughout that entire time, I knew where I'd be sleeping each night. And every 10 kilometers or so, there's somebody with a trestle table and fresh water and a medic if I'm worried about I've got any boo-boos on my feet, you know? I mean, yeah, great fun. Tough, really good fun. Loved it. Very different to Kyrgyzstan, I imagine. With that scant information on the run-in, were there times where you must have been concerned that you wouldn't be able to get the provisions you'd need along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny, because I think these things from the outside look really mega and gnarly compared to our normal lives. But actually, our normal lives are way more complicated than doing something like this. Like my day, every single day, was to wake up, filter some water, have some breakfast, and then move in a generally southwest direction. And then find some water along the way, find some food along the way, and find somewhere to sleep. And that was like my entire to-do list, you know? Like your daily life doesn't have anywhere near, like has way more stuff than that. But yeah, you just live in anxiety of where does the next water source, and will I get food in the next village, and will I be okay in the next village, and stuff like that. And that's all you have to think about. It's so simple, which is quite freeing. You know, whenever I come back from these big things, I was out there for a month. When I came back, I think that was kind of what contributed to the post-adventure blues, was this overwhelm of, you know, my life. Like I had every morning I had to decide what to wear. In Kyrgyzstan, I didn't have that problem. I only had one t-shirt. Every morning, you just get up and you're ready. You know, and now I've got to decide what to wear, and I've got emails. I've got a million apps on my phone that are all pinging and begging for my attention. I've got things to do. You know, it is quite a simple life out in the mountains.
And it seems to be a simple life that calls to you as well. You say you look at the mountains longingly whenever you see them. Would you describe yourself as a fairly introverted character?
Yeah, and that definitely makes these things a lot easier. I think that's the one thing that people get really hung up on. It's not how far I went or how difficult it was. It's always, oh my God, but you were alone.
Yeah.
And yeah, I am an introvert, so I'm completely comfortable with time alone in my own head. I can manage days like that, like days on end, without speaking to another person. Yeah, that definitely makes things a lot easier to be an introvert.
Which it leaves you with a bit of a dichotomy, really, doesn't it? That what you are doing is going out there and doing these really inspiring things, and people get a lot of positives from reading about the adventures that you've been out on, and maybe it triggers them to go off and do these things as well. But you can't really do that without a public profile. And you're balancing having to sort of promote what you're doing with doing something that is very isolated and where you're absolutely self-reliant and on your own for large periods of time. Do you find that a bit of a juggling act for you?
Yeah, I do sometimes feel like I'm living at two extremes. That, you know, I like all this time alone, but something that's given me a lot of energy to do that is, you know, the public speaking and having a large group of people online that follow. Like, you know, when I started, I ran across Kyrgyzstan, I had maybe like 500 followers. It was just kind of like genuinely me out there in the mountains. But because I did stuff like that, and because I wrote about it, and I do try to share it in a way that I hope inspires people to do their own big challenges. You don't have to run across Kyrgyzstan if you don't want to, but like, you know, whatever is the big challenge that you want to do, I do like to take the lessons that I learned and pass it on so that people can feel encouraged to do the things that they want to do. But yeah, that didn't mean that I grew a following up until, you know, the more recent ones that I've done. I'm doing that knowing that I might feel like I'm alone. I might look around me and not see anyone. But the fact is that there's, you know, this big group of people following me online. So I'm not alone. And there's a positive and a negative to that. But I feel like, you know, I'm carrying all these people with me. They all think I'm going to do it. They all believe in me, which is really nice. I have so many cheerleaders. But then there's also this pressure that I never had before.
It's suddenly you feel like I've got to do it for them as well.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, again, there is a positive to that. Like I think I shared an interview when I was in the Atlas Mountain Race earlier this year. When I knew that I was the first woman, that changed everything, because now it wasn't just about what I wanted to do. Is that I knew there were a lot of women watching that race, and that it meant a lot to them to see a woman perform well. And so then I had this pressure of like, you know, I was just, up until then, I had just been happy to finish this thing and just be successful in the sense of getting to the finish line. And now I knew like, what I do in this race represents the sisterhood. You know, I can't give up because of them. And so that was, yeah, pressure can be hard, but then at the same time, it was really motivating to know I had that gang of cheerleaders behind me.
Oh, that's fantastic. You said there specifically as well that, you know, you've got a sisterhood behind you, and as a woman on your own in a Kyrgyzstani mountain range, you must have heard so many. You must have been warned on the way in. You must have been told, this is crazy.
Oh, massively. And, you know, and sometimes it was just like, you know, what are you doing? This is a bad idea. But then sometimes it actually was like, I remember men with their horses standing literally in front of the trail, blocking me from going because they were so adamant that I would die out there.
Wow.
They really didn't want me to do it. And the Kyrgyz are the most hospitable people out there. You know, they're just, really lovely. They'll always smile. They'll always help you. But every time I would speak to someone or ask them for directions or tell them what I was doing, they would always point me back to the nearest road or village and try to get me out of there. You know, no one, they were all really supportive and happy that I was there in their country, but they did not want me out in the mountains because, you know, it came from a lovely place. It came from a paternal concern that they just didn't want me to get hurt. But it was just this unanimous opinion that I would fail and that this would be a disaster and that, you know, obviously just didn't understand the scale of the challenge. And they would all, and the thing was, I never told anyone I was running all the way across Kyrgyzstan. I only ever, when people asked me where I was going, I would just tell them the nearest location that I was trying to get to, what the next checkpoint was. And they would be like, no, you'll never make it. You can't do that. You know, someone tried to sell me a horse once, which was really tempting. I even remember the last day was just kind of like I had to run on the road to get into I finished in the city called Osh. So you just end up on the road for that last bit coming into the urban environment. And I put in this great 62-kilometer run. I was feeling really good. And I remember when I realized I was 5 kilometers away from the finish line, and I started to kind of well up with tears, like, oh my God, I've totally done it. Because 5 kilometers, you know, you've done it now. That's just...
You're basically there.
Victory.
It's a full stop.
Yeah. And then, but because I was on a busy road, I can't tell you how many cars stopped in that last 5 kilometers and were like, you can't make it all the way to Osh. You'll never make it. It's so far. It's 5 kilometers away. Get in the car. And I was like, what? You're like, you have no idea how far I've come to get here.
But of course, it must have been very difficult to communicate that as well.
I don't speak Russian. I definitely don't speak Kyrgyz. And then obviously you're doing something that there's no culture for. You know, there's no culture for that kind of stuff in a country like Kyrgyzstan, especially with women. So, yeah, you're up against quite a lot trying to explain what you're doing.
In terms of inspiring women to do these sorts of things, did you encounter people while you were over there in Kyrgyzstan where you feel like you had that kind of effect locally as well as the people who are around the world following you on Instagram?
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that really, you know, warms my heart and keeps my legs moving. Sometimes I think it's better to get these messages from an outsider, to see, you know, a strong, sorry, there's a car behind me, see kind of like a strong woman come through and say what she's doing and share her world of sport and adventure and travel. And to hear that from a woman who's outside your community is sometimes easier for especially the men to take on board. You know, and that's kind of how I think things change and our perceptions of other people change is just through stories and through meeting people from different walks of life who do different things, you know. So yeah, you know, it's maybe a really slow way to change the world is by trying to run through it and meet a few villages along the way. But yeah, I definitely had some really interesting conversations about women's roles around the world.
I bet. Absolutely fascinating. I've got to ask, I don't really want to play to the naysayers here, but did you run into any hairy situations while you were there? Were there any times during that Kyrgyzstan run where you're thinking, oh no, they might have been right?
Yeah, definitely. There was a really big issue with water. I did it in the end of the season because I wanted all the passes to be clear of snow, but the downside of that was the snow had completely cleared and the rivers were dry. So I had some really troubling long distances where I didn't get any water, any food, and that was unhealthy. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll pass out. That wasn't that bad, but you know, it's not comfortable. But yeah, I had a really bad navigational error that I'll always remember. I hope I'll always remember it because it was just this really sketchy day that I ended up in the completely wrong valley, and I set off some landslides, which meant I remember thinking to myself, I was going down this valley and I went over these landslides that were mega, and I thought, well, I can't go back. No matter what happens now, I can't go back in that direction because that land is completely unstable and I'll get buried in a rock avalanche. So I had this no turning back attitude, and then I turned the corner and realized I couldn't go forward anymore. The valley I was in turned into a gorge and there was just no passable way on foot. So I only had two options. I could either go into the river that was below me, and it was pretty serious white water. I thought, you know, I could try to float out of this valley, but I'll probably hit my head and die. Or I could just climb over the mountain that I was walking underneath, which didn't look that pleasant either. It was incredibly steep. And it was all scree. So I thought I might die on the mountain climb, but I'll probably more likely die in the river. So I decided to do this mountain climb. It was my own free solo. And it was kind of like this prolonged near-death experience. I knew that at any moment, if I made a mistake on this climb, that I could potentially not recover from that mistake. And I remember quitting. I remember saying to myself, look, I've just got to survive this. I probably won't, but if I do, then I have to admit that this was outside of what I'm capable of. This is unacceptable to take this level of risk. I'm just going to go home. And I promised myself that if I got to the top of this climb, I would just go to the nearest road and I would quit. I think I was 3 days away from the nearest road, but I still decided I would get to those 3 days and then I would quit. And yeah, the funniest thing happened, when you're in that moment, you have so much adrenaline going through you that you're so focused. There was no fear. There was no stress. I was just really focused. But then as soon as I got to the top, I knew that I was going to be okay. Like on the other side was this like beautiful rolling green valley that couldn't have been safer anywhere in the world. And as soon as the adrenaline left my body, I just had this massive cry. Like no adults has ever cried that hard. Just realizing what I had almost lost and cost my family. And then I just stopped crying. I fixed my ponytail and I got up and I was like, right, let's not do that again. And just kept on running. And I would just kind of, it was a big kind of slap in the head because it was all my mistake. Like I made a navigational mistake because I was just being really lazy with my navigation. I was just glancing at the map and I thought, yeah, I'll be fine. I just kept on running. And when you're alone, you have to do everything double. You have to take your navigation way more seriously. You have to take your safety way more seriously because there's no one to catch your mistakes. There's no one to make sure that you're doing this right. So, that was a really big reminder that I needed to take this way more seriously, that I needed to slow things down and make sure that I didn't make any mistakes. Because there isn't a room for error in mountains like that. So yeah, I did keep on going. I didn't quit. I didn't even consider quitting again. I just thought, what, these people will be right if I'm not careful. Like there's no glory in doing this the hardest way or the fastest way. The glory is all in just being safe and getting through this. So it kind of changed things for me after that. I just thought, safety when you're on your own is a completely different bag.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you say, with nobody else around, you don't have a second check on anything you're doing. But also, if you relax, there's no one to give you a kick in the ass and tell you need to be taking this more seriously. So it's really tough. You've got to be very self-policing, and you did immensely well. I'm really, really glad that you did carry on and finish that trip. Who knows if you'd ever have jumped onto this, mountain range on every continent if that had been where that story ended.
Oh yeah, no, I'd probably be shell shocked and never go out and try anything for a while. I mean, obviously, I go into these things knowing that the risk of failure is huge. You take on something of that size, the risk of anything going wrong is just massive. Like most likely when it's just that something in my body is going to go and not like running that far because my body does not like running that far. So injury is really high on that list, but also safety, anything happening in the world. Like there's so many things that can go wrong. So I've gone into all of them knowing that the chance of failure is extremely high. But by the time you get there, you just think to yourself, I'm not accepting failure. I've taken a month out of my life to do this. I've worked so hard to be here. I've got this huge opportunity. I'm on the other side of the world. I have to make this work. I have to get through this. Like I'll limp if I have to, but I'm going to get there.
Well, what an incredible learning and developing experience for you as well. After Kyrgyzstan, you went for Morocco. What attracted you to Morocco?
Mainly it was the mountain range in Africa that worked for what I was trying to do. Africa is obviously a really difficult landscape, the whole continent. But I kind of had my parameters of what kind of mountain range would work, like what kind of distance, it had to be kind of between 600 and 1,000 kilometers. And the Atlas, I think, came out as 870 in the end is what I ran. So it was kind of the perfect distance. Yeah, it was just the mountain range that qualified, basically. And it was, and I did it completely self-funded. From Edinburgh to Marrakesh was like, I think it was £55 flight, I think is what I paid to get there.
Well done.
Like expedition budget-wise, I think I spent a few £100s to do the whole thing. So it was really doable. I could do it really soon. It wasn't that far away. Which I realized because I just, I'd run across Kyrgyzstan the year before, which when I had all the kit, I knew what I was doing. I felt really confident about it. And I just thought, oh God, I could run across a mountain range next month if I wanted to. I could just pack my bag and I could just like bash this one out. How hard could it be? So, yeah, I went into Morocco feeling really confident that this was a goer. Morocco has guidebooks. Lots of tourists go there. Maybe not to the places that I was going, but I at least kind of had at least that starting ground. No one had, again, I found that no one had run across, or even, I couldn't find anyone that had crossed the Atlas Mountains. So again, I had that world first sensation, but also, I just thought, I know what I'm doing. These mountains are way smaller than the Tian Shan, which means it can't possibly be as hard, and super confident.
I mean, you really did go in with the toughest one, didn't you? The amount that you must have learnt during your time in Kyrgyzstan put you in good stead for any mountain range you can do afterwards, because, okay, I'm not saying that it's a very developed area, but the area you were running through Morocco would have had more infrastructure, I guess, than anywhere you'd been in Kyrgyzstan. And you'd been through that sort of experience before. Do you ever look back and think, maybe I should have done these the other way around?
I actually think I'm in a place in my life that I can almost always say, no matter what's going wrong, that I've probably been through worse. And there's a lot of freedom in that, because you've always got this confidence that you're like, you know what, we went through worse times, we got this one. So it is kind of good to go out with a really hard one, actually. It just meant that, I just told you one story of me crying in Kyrgyzstan. There were a few more good stories of me having a little crying breakdown in Kyrgyzstan, because I had to learn a lot of lessons along the way. But you know what, that's part of it. And they all come with their lessons. I did Southern Alps most recently, and that was New Zealand. So you think to yourself, I remember going there feeling like I might be letting myself down by going somewhere as lovely as New Zealand. I thought, this is a holiday. There's GPX files for the trails. Am I cheating this whole thing? But it's still, you still find ways to make it hard. Like, New Zealand was still just as hard as the other ones. It was just hard in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. A mountain range is still a mountain range. Your legs still have to climb every lumpy bit you're putting yourself at. You can't take anything away from that. So from Morocco, you then went for Bolivia. Is that right?
Yeah. It always had to. I knew from the outset that South America, it had to be Bolivia. Yeah, I'd always wanted to go there. They're the biggest mountains in the Andes, and I decided, size matters. I'll go for the big ones. Regrettable choices, but in a lot of ways, they were actually the hardest one that I did. The Tian Shan were hard, but Bolivia just threw everything it had at me. It was meant to be the dry season, but climate change kind of robbed Bolivia of dry season that year, and the weather was terrible. And we were dealing with terrible weather at 5,000 meters altitude. Things can get serious really quickly, and it was like that every day. The altitude was a significant factor for some reason. Obviously, crime and violence against women statistics are pretty dismal for Bolivia, so I was quite afraid of a lot of things that were going on. It was one of the most beautiful places I've been on this planet, but you had to earn it. And I had to earn every single footstep across the Bolivian Andes. They were brutal.
I bet. Altitude-wise, how did that compare with the Atlas run or the Tian Shan run? What's the altitude like when you were passing through Kyrgyzstan, for instance?
Kyrgyzstan, I was at 4,000 a few times. I was only insured to 4,500 meters, so I stayed below that mark. But yeah, Kyrgyzstan, I think I was always between 2,000 and just over 4,000. The Atlas, and one of the reasons why I thought the Atlas would be fantastic is because the highest, I think I hit 3,000 on one mountain pass. But other than that, you're always kind of below 3,000. So, you're at a level that you don't even have to think about it. The Andes, I crossed over 5,000 several times. At one point, I had to dip all the way down to 700 and then get back up to 4,500 the next day. And that was one of the hardest days ever. But yeah, I was almost always kind of hovering between 4,000 and I think 5,200 was the high point of the run.
I guess expedition runner has become this term that I've seen in a couple of places for this weird sort of niche you've gotten yourself into. That what you're talking about there sounds like mountaineering. Like the difference is you're maybe not wearing quite as many layers and you're not actually having to climb ropes and all that sort of stuff. But 5,000 meters is a serious amount of altitude. I've been to Cusco a few times. That's about 3,500. I don't have great fitness levels. I can't climb a flight of stairs in Cusco without being out of breath and swearing my nuts off. I can't imagine you obviously acclimatise slowly over the course of the run, but do you still feel that oxygen deprivation at that level?
Yeah, and that was something I was really worried about and something that made me want to keep going kind of fast, was because I didn't know how long I could keep my body at that altitude running the way that I was. But it was really frustrating because I did have troubles with altitude. And actually the month before I went back to Kyrgyzstan, if you can imagine, for a bike race. So, I'd just done this race where I was well over 4,000 meters several times. I was definitely fit, I'd won the race. Like I was in a good place fitness wise.
Awesome.
And then I knew that Bolivia was going to be really high. So I did everything right. I normally don't even take the time to do everything right. But this time I did. I flew into Peru so that I could kind of gradually, I took the bus there so that I would arrive really gradually at altitude. I took the, what's it called? Diamox? I don't know, the drugs. I took the drugs for the first time. I took a week to acclimatize that I just sat in La Paz just trying to breathe every day. Actually, when I flew to Bolivia, I didn't have my route. I literally just got on the plane going like, I don't know. Like, I know where the Andes are and I'll just figure it out. Because I just figured I'll have all this time in La Paz where I'm hardly going to be able to like stand up. So I'll do my route then. So I was just sitting around La Paz doing my route. So it really, I've talked to a lot of mountaineers about this, that altitude, like you just can't pick it. It's got nothing to do with your fitness. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. And that time I did, and I got HAPE, which is when the fluid is in your lungs. So you're starting to drown.
Yeah.
Which is bad. And again, the risk of going alone is that I didn't recognize that, which I'm still really surprised in myself because I know the symptoms of altitude sickness, but they're really similar to the symptoms of just being unfit. You're out of breath going uphill. You're feeling a little bit dizzy because you're going uphill. So I was just like, I do tough love really hard. And I remember going up the hill and having to stop every 3 steps to just like lean on my trekking poles and kind of gasp for air for a while. And I was just shouting at myself, like, this is your fault. You're just not fit. Like, just move faster. And I would just like push myself, and I kept going. And that's what you're not meant to do when you have altitude sickness. You're not meant to keep going up. But I did for a couple of days, until I realized, like, I woke up one morning feeling pretty bad, and I realized, this wasn't unfit. This was unwell. And I was going to have to go. And so I went to a clinic. There was like an American-run clinic because obviously getting blood work and stuff done in one of the poorer countries of the world, you kind of want to be careful about what needles go into your body. Yeah. So I went to this clinic. It was the first time I've ever used travel insurance. Went into this clinic, got an X-ray done, and they said, "Yeah, you've got HAPE. You're going to need to take 2 weeks off." And I was like, "Can we make that maybe like 4 days? Because I'm kind of like to catch." Yeah. So that made everything hard. Obviously, that slowed me down a lot because I had to take the time out. But then obviously, I was unwell. I didn't have complete lung capacity. I was trying to push through this thing again. Like I said, I don't accept failure. I'd flown to the other side of the world, and I do feel a lot of guilt when I fly that far. I thought, I can't just fly back now. That's not fair. I've got to make this worth it. I've got to produce something for this. That's something to show for myself. So I got back out there and just wheezed and coughed my way across the Andes.
Oh man, well done. I mean, you don't seem to have done any of these runs the easy way. There's you hit some walls here.
No, and I don't know if any of them will, and I guess I'm kind of conscious of that because coming up, so I was meant to, at the moment, I should actually be in Georgia running across the Caucasus. Obviously the world has changed a little bit, so I'm not there. I didn't want to end up quarantined in Azerbaijan. No offense to Azerbaijan. So I'm going to do what was meant to be the final one, was going to be the Rockies where I grew up. And that would be a good way to finish the challenge. This whole thing started from my love of mountains where I come from. So it goes full circle. So, I swap them around. So I'm doing the Rockies as number 5 instead of number 6. And I've kind of got that in the back of my mind. And I'm going like, I'm going to be running through places that I know, places that I learned how to hike for the very first time. My very first camping trips, I'm going to pass those places. Like, these are going to be places that I'm really familiar with. And I know myself. I know that there's a big risk in that, feeling comfortable and feeling like you know where you are, because mountains are mountains, and I know that the Rockies can be mean. So I'm kind of, every time that I look at the map, I'm just reminding myself, like, just because you've been there doesn't mean it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
All the same lessons apply.
Still a big challenge. It's not just the home stretch.
Oh yeah. No, it won't be easy.
Oh, absolutely not. We've kind of skirted over New Zealand here. I feel a little bit bad for the Kiwis. When was it you were in New Zealand?
That was the start of last year. I think it was a February, March. Yeah. So the end of their summer. I've got that right. Yeah. Yeah, it was, God, it's a beautiful place. My word, like Southern Alps are just, I think they're the perfect mountains. Like if you just close your eyes and think about a beautiful mountain scene. What you come up with is probably what the Southern Alps look like. They're just absolutely stunning.
I can scribble out my question about what I thought was your favorite mountain range now, so we can get rid of that.
No, that's not fair. I don't like that question. Like,
I wouldn't do that to you. I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, don't do it to me. But you know, they're just stunning. They're an absolute playground. But the big lesson that I learned, because remember I said I thought maybe I was letting myself down going to a Western country after the first three had been proper expeditions and that no one had done them before. Whereas Southern Alps, it's not an expedition. It's like, I don't know, a holiday, you know? Yeah. People go run out, you know, Kiwis produce the best athletes in the world. Like, people have all run those trails. So I thought, you know, it won't be hard logistically. It won't be hard culturally. So I still got to make it the same level of hard. So I'm going to try and like bomb this thing, do it really fast. I'll do like at least 60 kilometers a day. And that was kind of what I went into it with. And then I got really punched in the face from the outset with, you know, in the developing world, all trails, they only exist for people to get places, for people to get to their crops, people to get to the next village. So all the trails go. Whereas in the Western world, trails exist for leisure. The middle class would kick off if you made their trails wide and accessible. Yeah. And the Kiwis, like, oh my word, man, like the stuff that they have in Europe would definitely be a via ferrata. There'd just be no chance that they would just let you just like run up that stuff. Like, oh my God, if you don't like heights, do not go to the Southern Alps. The trails are so hard. Like, they're amazingly good fun. But I just found my days were like 80% scrambling and 20% running at best. And I would get to the end of the day having put in a 12-hour moving pace, and like I'd look down at my watch and flop into my bivy, and my watch would say I'd done 25 kilometers, and I'd be devastated. Like, I'd worked all day. I worked so hard. What do you mean I only went 25 kilometers? And so I was so stressed. I spent a couple of weeks of that run just being really stressed about how slow I was going and how long this was taking. I must be unfit. So I was just shouting at myself to go faster. And then I had one day where there was like a little mountain pass, and then I had a 20-kilometer run on a double track to get to my next resupply. So I thought, that's fantastic. I'm going to be at the resupply tonight. I know that there's chocolate in my resupply box. I'm like looking forward to that. So I was really confident. And then this mountain pass, it just turned out that the track was just the river. It was riven up and the river going down. It was like big boulders, and I was having to, you know, scramble and boulder and like things that were much taller than me, trying to crawl up and then jump down on the other side. And like, it took me all day. And then I remember I got to the bottom of the path where I was meant to start my little 20-kilometer run. And it was the end of the day. It took me 7 hours to move 4 kilometers. And that stands as a world record for the slowest day of my life. And at first I thought to myself, well, whatever, I'll just do this 20-kilometer run. I'll put on my head towards. I'll just do it for the night. And I just kind of collapsed because, of course, I hadn't stopped and eaten all day. And at first I was really frustrated. And then I realized, you know what, that 4 kilometers, okay, that's brutal, but like, that was the most fun I've ever had. That was so much fun. I spent the whole day climbing up things and jumping off of them. It was when we talk about play rather than running, you know, that was play. It was so much fun. If I could just change my mindset to, I need to be successful at getting across a mountain range, and just change it to, you know, what a pleasure. I'm in a mountain range. You know, this is fantastic.
Is this where those real world concerns start to creep in again, where you're trying to make your way down that mountain, but at the same time you're thinking, well, my Instagram following thought I'd do 60K today, and I've got a flight in 14 days time, and I'm at least 20 days hiking away from the airport. Yeah, I bet. No, it's got to be really tough to deal with.
Yeah, so it took kind of till the end of that mountain range to realize, you know, this is such a pleasure. It's such a joy. I'm so privileged to get to do this stuff. You know, like, just calm down about what it is and what your expectations are. Like, let go of your expectations. You're the mountains. They're going to laugh at you for having them. You know, just enjoy it. Do it on your own terms. And that was really the big lesson in New Zealand for me.
Well, doing it on your own terms, I think, would be a good sort of subheading for all of your adventures. You really seem to bring a lot of your personality to what you do. One thing I did want to ask about is what does, you know, we touched earlier on the fact that people will assume that you're some kind of incredible elite athlete in order to be doing this kind of stuff. What does your training tend to look like? Are you an uber scientific, measuring every macro kind of a person, or are you just enjoying the process of training?
Enjoying the process for sure. I mean, obviously I try to do things right, and I do try to do my physiotherapy exercises, I guess. But no, I mean, for it to be sustainable, it has to be joyful. It has to be something that I want to be part of my life. I can't look at it like punishment the way that I did when I was a teenager. Like, I know from going through it that doesn't work. And, some people, they love to geek out and have their spreadsheets and have their scientific approach. But for me, I don't. I like to look at these things as play. Being active is just a big part of my life. I do go outside every day and do something every day. So, if I think about it more in terms of adventure, like I want to get on my bike and go to that, I don't know, that hill that I've never been up before, then it's exciting for me. And I don't think about it as how many kilometers I need to ride today or how many calories I need to burn. I just go out for fun and try to have some discipline with the like yoga and weight training thing. Cause that's one thing I've learned with running across the mountain range is that your muscles will just leave on the way. At the end of it, I always think I'm going to be so fit at the end of these, but I actually get to the end and I just have really skinny legs and I don't understand like, where did all my power go? You just lose them on these endurance challenges. So, and also obviously, like I said, the risk being really high, and I think risk of injury being probably the most likely reason why I would fail at one of these. And I just can't accept that at all. So I try to be disciplined on that side, but otherwise I just try to be healthy and have fun.
I love that. I love the idea that you should be focused on this as not the punishment that you do because you ate pizza the night before, just something you do because it's purely pleasurable to do it.
And everyone's got to find a sport that works for them in that sense. Like some people do like the gym. So if you like the gym, do the gym. I know a lot of people hate running and I just always say to them, like, that's fine. I completely understand why you would hate running. Don't do it then. Find a sport that you do like doing. If that's, I don't know, if that's tennis, then just like play tennis. Like don't do things just because you think that's the only way to stay healthy. There's a sport that everyone's going to enjoy. As long as you're moving and doing something and it brings you joy, then you're good.
So I'm going to have to come on to one of the biggest questions that you ask anybody who does the kind of challenges you do, which is to tap into the why. What is it? What is it that you get out of these experiences that's so valuable to you that you throw yourself back in that meat grinder again a few months later?
And I get something different from every single big challenge. And that's been, I think, the valuable thing that's really kept me going is that every one of my big challenges has taught me a massive life lesson that's made me a better person, a more successful person, a stronger person, more competent person. So I get so much from each one, but they've all been really different. And I know that every time I go out there, I'm going to get something back from it that's going to help me grow. So I think that's the big reason why I do things the hard way. And the other side of it is that, like I said, travel and adventure, that's my passion. I want to know what's around the next corner. I want to see every corner of this planet. I'm just really curious about it. So I've kind of got those two things going on. That one, I just want to see everything. And then two, apparently I just want to do it the hard way because, I gain so much from doing it that way.
Fantastic. Everybody has a different answer to that question. And I just think that's absolutely fascinating. But you have packaged up your adventures in a way, and I'll leave the links to your website and stuff like that in the description of this because they're absolutely worth going back and watching these. And I'd love to talk to you about some of them. You're just filming them yourself on one camera most of the time, aren't you? I mean, you've done some really inventive stuff from a filmmaking point of view to say it's just you and one GoPro most of the time. So, if you're listening to this, go and watch those videos. They are absolutely inspiring and they will make you want to go and run around Kyrgyzstan as well. But you have created a voice that is very much a yes in the face of all the no's that you must have heard on the way into your first adventure. So what if there are female athletes sitting listening to this right now and thinking, well, maybe I can go somewhere crackers, maybe I can spin a globe and point at the thing and go and do this, what would you have to say to them?
I would say, and this is a total abuse of my last name, but you're tougher than you think. And that's something that you're going to find when you go there. When I did my first adventures and people always told me, no, that's too hard. You can't do that. You'll fail. I didn't really argue with them because I didn't have any reason to say that they were incorrect. I'd never done anything like that before. So I couldn't actually say that I've got this. But I looked forward. I remember in my mind looking forward to the day when I was like all grown up and I would have done a lot of big expeditions and people would believe in me. And you know what? Now I'm 31 years old. I think I've proven myself. I think I've done some pretty hard expeditions. I've won some races. Like I would like to think that objectively, I'm pretty good at what I do, but people still doubt me. I still get that every single thing that I've ever planned. And as I continue to go forward, people will always say to me things like, you got to be careful about X, Y, Z. And, there's a big risk. And I just thought that if I proved myself, that would go away. But now I know it doesn't go. They're always going to doubt you. People are always going to say to you the reasons why you're going to fail. So if you do spin that globe and pick your adventure and you want to do it, just know that people are going to say that, but they're wrong. You got this. Back yourself. You're tougher than you think. And you just got to walk past those people and you've got to do it anyway.
Fantastic. I don't know if I could have come up with a better way of ending that episode. But there you go. That's why I called you.
There you go.
Well, look, I look forward to speaking to you again after you've completed the next couple of these, or whatever your next adventure ends up being. Who knows what the world is going to throw at us over the next few months. But whatever it is, you've been really inspiring to talk to. I'm sure you've been really inspiring for people to listen to as well. And just thank you very much for taking the time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Will.
Yeah, no worries at all. Take care.